Sir Robert Grant, welcome to Free Your Voice.
Thank you, Dustin. Great to be here with you.
So, to our audience, if you don't know who Robert Grant is, he is someone that I got to learn and got to know over the years. He's someone who's taught me quite a bit. He's taught me how to think for myself, how to love myself, how to understand that I am unique, I'm one of a kind, and that I'm part of a community. He's someone that welcomes you into his community. Now, Robert, you didn't always have your current role. You came from the world of business and finance. Tell us your story.
Well, actually, I was starting out in my life as a musician mainly, and most people didn't know that about me because at 21 years old, when I was in college, I decided that I needed to buckle down and get serious and get a real job, because at some stage I was going to have a family, and it was going to cost money, and I was going to buy a house and all the stuff that comes along with that. And so I thought maybe music is not the right way to go, because not many musicians actually make it, if you know what I mean. And I knew that I wasn't going to likely be that tiny 1,000th% of musicians that actually do make it. So I gave up music, and that was a heartbreak for me because I loved it. I totally loved it. I was a performance major. I had a scholarship for it. I gave up my scholarship and everything, and then went straight into finance. And it didn't seem like I was selling out at the time. It didn't. But there was some part of me that was related to my heartistry, the artistry that you conduct and you create with your heart, that basically died when I made that decision. But I was so busy, I went straight into the business world. I went on to MBA school, and I had a very successful career. And it wasn't until much later in life that I kind of had this full sea change in my life, and I started to reintegrate those things that I'd left behind when I was younger. And that was all part of me forming my persona in my early age. I remember when I was 22 years old, I thought, oh my gosh, my parents have gained like at least 50 IQ points in the last 7 years, from the time I was 15, when I thought they were crazy and not very smart at all. And then by the time I was 22 and 25, they got smarter every year. And I realized that at that early point in my life, that the more I was learning and experiencing through life, the less I was actually knowing. And that the world was not about black and white. It was not about making decisions where I just said, I'm not going to be a musician anymore, right? And going out and being successful in business, and that's the persona that I created for myself. I realized then that life was a journey, and that every day that went by, I had an opportunity to learn more and more about the world around me. And I first started off by trying to go out into the world and learn about the world around me. I learned several languages. I lived in 9 countries. I've been to over 140 countries. And I started realizing that the journey that I was really on was a self journey. Know thyself. And as I started to understand the world around me, that gave me a glimpse into myself. Because I think even though Socrates said know thyself, and they're the 2 very simple words to say, knowing yourself is the most difficult thing that we ever do in this lifetime.
Now, why is that? Because we live with ourselves. I'm me, so why do I struggle with getting to know me? And do I know who I am?
Well, it's like a knife. A knife can't cut itself. An eye can't see itself unless it has the aid of a mirror. A tooth can't bite itself. A light can't illumine itself. And our own consciousness can't perceive itself. So we are the only ones that can't see the full 360 degrees of us. And we're literally lying to ourselves in a way when we look in the mirror, because we only see the things we want to see. It's very rare for a human being to be able to see themselves objectively without their conditioning biases. And the way we formed our personas through time is by deciding the things that caused us shame, the things that made us feel vulnerable. All of us at some stage say, oh, I don't want to feel that vulnerability. So we hide it away. Right? We puff ourselves up to the world around us. Or we go and say, I'm not that. And we start judging it at everyone else as a mechanism of deflection. Because what we experience in this life is everything that we judged is what we attracted. And we will continue to attract everything we judge in the world around us until we no longer judge everything we attract. And this is the life that we experience. It's not a universe, it's a you-inverse, I believe.
So when you were the president of Allergan, you couldn't free your voice.
No, definitely
I mean,
not.
heavy's the head that wears the crown. You finally got that job. You wanted it. It was something that was the top and pinnacle. You got there. And what was it like?
It was exciting. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it was like I was 36 years old. And here I am, president of a multi-billion-dollar global corporation in one of the most interesting and exciting industries in the world, aesthetic medicine. I mean, like literally working with plastic surgeons and dermatologists who believed it was their edict to fix and correct some of the stuff sometimes that God didn't do perfectly. And there's so many, I don't want to diminish because it's not something to be diminished. People that suffer from cleft palates, as children, they can be corrected. And there are incredible reconstructive surgeries that can basically fix challenges that people face from a physical ailment perspective in some way, shape, or form. And it's not just in plastic surgery that we see this. We see this in so many different fields in medicine. But for me, it was part of my journey. My journey was a journey that started out from the outside and then it went inward. And aesthetic medicine was all about the outside. And so it was the pinnacle of jobs. I mean, I remember when I first started in the industry of medical aesthetics, walking around the convention halls in the early 90s and thinking, oh, one day I'm going to be the leader of this industry. In my early 20s, and I was saying this to myself, and 13 years later I was. And that was kind of surreal, right? Because it's like you can spend your entire life working towards some sort of goal, and then you get there, and you're just sort of like surprised that you got there. And that's honestly how I felt. Let's assume that we're all like mountain climbers in a way. We climb this great big mountain. It might be Everest, it might be Kilimanjaro. And until we reach the summit is our master. But then finally, when you scale the summit, the sky becomes your master. And the sky is pretty heavy. And you don't realize that I remember when I first became a public company CEO, before I was president of Allergan Medical, I basically woke up in the morning. I was CEO of a company called BioLace Technology. I was in my early 30s, the youngest public company CEO in the healthcare industry. And I turned on my computer. And of course, I wanted to see when the announcement went out that I'd become the CEO of the company. I was formerly the CFO and the chief operating officer. I wanted to see how the stock would react, right?
Yeah.
Because somehow I attached some value in myself to how the world would perceive me. Well, that's not really how life is it? We have to find our own value. That's why this question of knowing ourselves and being able to turn the knife that can't cut itself into its ability to perceive itself, at least.
Were you happy at this period in your life, Robert?
I felt like I was happy. I've never looked back on my life. I've always been an optimist. So I've never looked back on my life and thought about it in the sense that I wasn't happy. I was always happy. I was always enjoying everything I did. And I loved the work that I did. Even when I was in that realm, I loved every bit of it. It was like a fun, complex challenge. And every day I got to sleep on the edge of a knife. And I'd wake up and I'd see the stock price. I'd be like, oh, they like me today, right? But it's all false. Or, oh, something happened bad and they don't like me today. So you have to learn how to separate your true knowledge of self from how others are perceiving you based on the weather.
But how do you not allow them, your emotions, to dictate? Because the weather can most of the time control the way somebody is feeling.
Oh yeah, I lived in Germany for 3 years. I can tell you the weather does have a pretty strong impact on how you feel, especially in the winter. I mean, I remember going for 6 months with no sun, like literally gray skies every day. That has an impact on you. Living in Southern California, where it's sunny almost every day, does have an impact on you as well. And I've certainly chosen to live in Southern California. It's not that I don't like Germany. I love Germany. Germany's a great place. I like to go there in the spring and summer and fall. The winter is rough. It's really rough. And how do you basically detach yourself in a way from feeling down or feeling sad because the market doesn't like you? And what that really requires is for you to have that strength and fortitude when the chips are down, to realize that you put your everything into it. And sometimes you'll face disappointment. But what actually turns out to be the determining factor in long-term success is your resilience. You have to be able to get back up on the horse. It's no different than when you're on the playing field and you're playing flag football or whatever sport and you get kicked in the shins.
But does everybody have that, Robert? You act like that this is something that is very simple. Be resilient. Do we all have this code inside of us?
I think some people might be born more with the way to react and just be naturally more resilient. But then some people learn it. It can be a learned expression too. I definitely was probably more in the latter. I learned how to be resilient because, I realized early on that life's tough, but I could be tougher. And I needed to be able to still have my impact and not be down when I didn't succeed. I will give you an example. So it's a funny story. I wanted to be in the band, and the band director was passing out the instruments, and I was in 6th grade at the time, so it was in middle school in England. And so all the trumpets were passed out, and I wanted to be a trumpet player. And he's like, "Here, you have the French horn." I'm like, "French horn? No way. Like, that's not, cool people don't play French horn," right? That's exactly what I was thinking. And I went home and I told my mom, I'm like, I got, given this French horn, I'm not sure I want to do this now. And so I went back to school and I said, you know what? Because I'd been practicing, because I had a friend who had a trumpet that let me borrow it, my dad's friend. And so I'd been practicing. I said, look, I don't really want to play French horn. And if I have to play French horn, I don't think I'm going to stay in the band, right? So, and I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to hold you over a barrel or anything. I just really want to play trumpet. And I said, and I've been practicing. And so I said, so I'd like to challenge all the people that already have the trumpet. And I'll borrow one of theirs. And so in band, you have this process where you can challenge people to get seat position, right? It's kind of it's a drama thing. It's like there's a fight in the parking lot type thing. It's like for nerds in band, that's kind of what this was.
But what has been your benchmark of excellence? Because it sounds like to you it was always challenging yourself.
It was never, that was the funny thing. I realized at that point in time, whether in sports or in any type of competitive, situation, I realized that the ultimate competition was my own belief system. That the only real obstacles in life are the ones that I persistently believed in.
And you grew up in a Mormon
I did not grow up Mormon, no. At this time, I was born Catholic, but I joined the Mormon church when I was 18 years old. So when I was given this opportunity, and the band director was like chagrined, shocked at my request to challenge on the very first day of school, right? Like the first day of band. And I challenged, and I ended up beating, I played better, the section of music that he made us. So the band director directs, he says, you have to play this section of music and see how you do. And if you do better than the other guy, and all the rest of the band votes by clapping on who does better, right? So it's like a high stress situation. And so I challenged the first guy, and I did better, so I won. So then the band director was like, okay, well, Robert, take your seat, you're a trumpet player now. The other guy had to take the French horn. So then I said, oh, excuse me. He's like ready, he's got his thing on, tapping the music stand. He's like, let's go ahead and get started again. I said, I want to challenge the next person too. So there was like, you can't do that. There's like 7 trumpet players in there, right? I challenged every one, and I won. And I ended up as first chair. Now, I could have gone home, and I could have the day before and just said, you know what, I'll just accept the French horn. I didn't do that. I ended up exactly doing what I wanted to do, although I didn't think I was going to have to challenge everybody, but I'd been practicing all summer before, so I already knew how to play the trumpet. And I had to stand up and speak my mind and be willing to have the courage to say something. And I think that's what freeing your voice is about too. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where you have to constantly play down or diminish yourself because it might be too standoutish, right? You don't want to make other people look bad. And I certainly didn't want to make people look bad. But that was a formative experience for me to realize that, hey, I can do this. Under the most challenging of circumstances, either you'll have two types of people. Some people will fold. Others focus. The ones who learn resilience are the ones who learn how to focus in the most stressful of circumstances.
So fear, do you ever have it?
Oh yeah, I have fear. I gave a TED talk, which was all about how to overcome fear with gratitude. And a lot of people, it got millions of views, and a lot of people would make comments to me like, oh, well, that's not good. You can't just bypass your fear. You have to feel your fear. And they didn't realize that that's not what I meant. What I meant is you feel the fear, experience it, let it flow through you, but don't let it control you. Learn how to rise above the fear. And the way I learned to do that is by practicing a very intentional practice of gratitude. Whenever I feel afraid of something, I just remind myself, wait a minute, look how far I've come. Look at all the things that I've accomplished in life and all the things I'm grateful for. And that gives me somehow the strength to realize that I can't feel both gratitude and fearful at the same time.
So freedom, is it something you have to earn?
Well, my dad used to always say to me that freedom isn't free. He'd say, son, nothing in life is free, not even freedom. And I started to really contemplate that, and I'm a student of history. So I wanted to understand, why people took on big risks, risking their lives, and a lot of the paradigms that we know and experience today. I think part of the reason now why we've got such a malaise in society is that we have had a concerted attack on two things: free speech and also on history. It's the most powerful thing you can do.
And it's written by the victors, isn't that correct? History?
Of course. History is written by the victors. There's no doubt about that. And a lot of aspects of our history is not true. But you can look at it and say, well, is there really only one objective way to look at something? And that's something that I had to learn through life. I used to think, I used to collect facts. I love to collect facts. I knew little facts and trivia bits on virtually everything. And I was always learning more and more because I've always believed that I could learn something from every single person I meet. So I try to learn something from every person. Uber drivers, taxi drivers in Paris, doesn't matter.
So you're always learning.
Always learning. I've loved learning. And so what I realized then is that the facts that I thought I was collecting were merely facets. It's FACET. Facets of a larger prism of truth. And this is why we've got people who, 30 people might be eyewitness to a crime. And when you ask them, and they're on the stand, and they have to witness to what exactly occurred, you have 30 different stories of what happened. Why does this happen? Because people don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are.
See it through our eyes.
And you cannot separate your perception and your observation from your biases. We know this already. It's one of the biggest challenges in science. You can't.
So then who do we listen to? If we can only see it from our side, should we care about the opinions of others?
I greatly care about the opinions of others because really the way that I started to transition how I looked at the world, moving away from just an objective fact, is starting to say, okay, how could I get more angles of perception on this thing, whatever it is? And maybe the only way I could get the whole truth would be to be able to perceive as many subjective perspectives as possible. And I used to think, okay, it's either right or wrong. I think that's the thing that made me think that my parents became genius by the time I was 25 years old, was because at 15 years old, I thought, okay, the world is easy. It's black and white. Kill the bad guys, right? Get rid of all the bad guys and get rid of the bad aspects of yourself. Push them out of yourself, the things that you're ashamed of, and just don't do those things. Don't be that person. And it's like a sandbox. You know, the best strategy is first always defining what's in your sandbox, and then what's outside of your sandbox, what's not going to be your world. So you can take the conscious mind and separate it into the subconscious. So you've got this realm of the things you know. Let's say that's consciousness. Then you've got the things that you know that you don't know. That's subconsciousness. And then there's a whole other realm out there that some refer to as entropy, which is the stuff that you don't know, you don't know.
So how smart were our ancestors? Because today, I have to imagine most of the information that you've accumulated has been in books that are easily accessible or online, call it Google or some other, but our ancestors didn't have that.
Yeah.
How smart were they?
I think, well, not everybody, but there was a large number of them that we benefit greatly from today. You know, the philosophers. And a lot of them started out as polymaths. Polymaths are people that have many learnings. Poly and mathematics just means learning. A lot of people think mathematics is the study of quantity. It was not the study of quantity until the day of Aristotle. He narrowly classified it as the study of quantity, the science of quantity. But Plato said it was the language of all that is. It's the source code language of all that is, math and geometry. So in the ancient sense, to be a polymath, you had to become a philosopher. And the only pathway to philosophy would be to have a balanced learning of the quadrivium. So what's in the quadrivium? Arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. So as above, so below. This is founded on the basic principles of Hermetic wisdom. And so what did that mean? Well, the brain in this context is not so much a storage device of information. It's not like a hard drive storage unit. Instead, it's an antenna. And that antenna has to be tuned with hemisynchronization of both your left and right lobes of your brain, operating equally. The masculine and feminine principle operating together. The heart-brain concept. And this leads to a much higher order of understanding and awareness of self. And that person is able to become a philosopher. Today we study philosophy in universities. Philosophy is not what it was, which was a polymath before. Today philosophy is literally rhetoric. We study what other philosophers said. And we try to quote it as our own and then think that by studying what they said, you can actually become like they are or they were. That's not the case in the ancient sense. It was a wisdom path that really started in large part with geometry and understanding the underlying language that connects the entire existence around us.
So math and music, there's a connection.
Absolutely. So the right temporal lobe, which would be right here above like my ear, right on my side, right on my head, is the seat for a right-handed person of music. It's where your brain is processing music. The left temporal lobe, the exact same place but on the other side of the brain, is the seat for processing mathematics. So you could say the same thing for visual art next to the occipital lobe. So we see beauty, we see aesthetics, we see the golden ratio and things. And then that ends up showing up in the natural sciences. And so understanding how math and music are different expressions of the same thing. Music is simply the geometry that we experience with our ears. And geometry is the music we experience with our eyes. And you could then say, well, wait, that means that geometry is the underlying fact, right? That is the truth that is connecting all of these things, because geometry is right in the center of the brain, right by the pineal gland. Geometry is embedded into chemistry. You can't have chemistry without geometry. You can't have physics without geometry. So you could start by saying, okay, mathematics applied is geometry. Applied geometry is physics. Applied physics is biology and chemistry. Applied biology and chemistry then goes on to the other aspects that basically fill out this entire expanded world, right? So biology in its applied form becomes psychology. looking at social systems. And then psychology in its applied form is sociology. And sociology in its applied form is philosophy. And philosophy in its applied form is mathematics again. It goes in a circle. So it goes mathematics, geometry, physics, chemistry, biology, psychology, sociology, philosophy, and back to math. They're all part of the same continuum. They're not separate. It's us who separate it. The best mathematicians in our history, throughout history, were musicians. They understood the relationship between music and mathematics. Bernard Riemann of Riemann hypothesis fame was more famous for neo-Riemannian music theory than he was for mathematics. So if we really take this to its core, what's happened is we've separated the world out into all these disparate, separate disciplines. And we've told everybody, learn this, become great at math, and become a hyper-reductionist, become a specialized person, and give up your music and give up your other stuff, because that's the conditioning that we have in this world, because the whole world is based on scarcity. Everything right now is based on economics. And how do I get more money for my time? I make myself more scarce. I make my services that I render more rare. And the rarer those services, the more I can charge for that time.
But people tend to believe that they don't need to pay to play. They feel entitled. What I'm hearing is it took you thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of transactions, small, medium, large, to get here to be if I remember correctly, recently you were TV host of the year. Yeah. I mean, you become, first you're a president of a major pharmaceutical company. The world of finance, the world of math, leads you to the world of music, leads you to become a TV host. Da Vinci, how big of a part has he played in your life?
You know, I was always a big fan of Da Vinci's work. I'd always go, I lived in Europe from the time I was 7 until 14, and my parents took me all around Europe. So I got to go to Da Vinci museums all over the place and see his work, and I was always profoundly impacted by it. And his way of looking at the world was very much geometric and philosophical. And it extended into so many different fields. How is it he became such an expert in so many different fields? Well, because he became a thorough lover of geometry and wisdom. And the word philosophy actually means, philo is lover in Greek. Sophia is a woman's name, but it also means wisdom. Lover of wisdom is what philosopher is. And I've written a couple of books. One is called Philomath, and it's on Amazon. It's done very well in number theory and geometry, but it's also the unification of science and art through number. And then I wrote another book called Polymath, which is the second in the series. The third in the series is coming out very soon. It's called Philosopher.
Now, you make it sound easy, because ideas come easy, but you actually execute on these ideas.
Yeah, I have so many ideas, and most of them I've learned not even to talk about. Because it's like, why, if I can't apply my attention to it, if I can't actually turn it into an embodiment that turns into, say, a patent or something, then why even muse? It's amusing then. It's just like a passing thought. The stuff that I think could have a big impact on my experience and in the world for others as well is the stuff that I will take the time to go and file patents on. I have about 80 or so patents now. And I don't file patents, and a lot of people get this confused. They think that I file patents so I can assert them. I've never asserted a patent against anyone. The reason I file patents is because there's a level of rigor required to put into the embodiment of a patent that a patent office and has office actions around that will actually, through an academic process, help you hone down the idea to something that's reductionable, right? That you can actually reduce it to practice. You can make apparatus from it. You can do something with it. It forces you into a level of rigor that will actually allow you to manifest it, right? Which is very important. And it's a series of belief systems. I said the only real obstacles in life.
It's a process they put you through.
It's a process. Oh, it's a process. They definitely put you through. It's a multi-year process. I just got a
This
patent.
proves there is no plagiarism. It is yours. It is unique.
That's right.
And I think that's the beauty.
And they have experts in the patent office in every field. So I just got patents in the field of music My patents span electromagnetism, gravity, business systems, new laser and scanning technologies, optical coherence tomography, um, implantable lens technologies, right? I have so many different types of patent fields. And I just got my first patents in music and in music theory.
How did that feel?
It felt really cool because normally it's very difficult to get a patent in something that feels tangential to what we call in the patent parlance, we call it inherency. So you can't patent what's in nature, right? But the fact that I was able to create a patent embodiment with our very, very adept team of lawyers on how to make precise temperament tuning, and it was an entirely novel concept. And now their Philharmonic Orchestra is now tuning to it. It's pretty cool. It was an entirely mathematically derived tuning methodology that changes musical interval and puts it in the most ideal way. And it sounds amazing. Like, people love it. And it's very, very precise. It requires a lot of precision of decimal level of precision. Like 1/1 trillionth of a hertz, ideally, is what you would actually get to that degree of precision. And if you think about how cymatics impacts us, and are you familiar with cymatics? How you could play a sound in water, and the water will change its shape geometrically to match the sound because it's creating a standing wave in the water. Or I could take a plate, what's called a Chladni plate, and pour salt on that plate, and then take a violin bow and strike it across the edge of the plate, and it'll make a noise. And as it makes the noise, the salt will move like a marching band into exact geometric positions. With each different note, it's a different geometric position. This is called cymatics, and the study of this is a profound new area of science that I think is going to have a massive impact on biology and chemistry. It's literally the way the universe orders things, and once you see it, you can't unsee it.
So I recently was watching a video, and they were magnifying a snowflake. The designs.
Yeah, that's cymatic. It's from a frequency. Each snowflake
unique.
is a hexagonal design, right? And sometimes it'll have on the outer edges, so you could have like a hexagon in the center, but it'll also branch out and create pentagons.
But it seems to be this universal code.
It is.
It's
It's mirroring our life. I mean, our geometry is based on our DNA. Our DNA is based on the golden ratio. The width of DNA is 21 angstroms. The length of a DNA strand is 34. Those are both Fibonacci numbers. 34 divided by 21 angstroms is 1.618. That's the golden ratio. That's what we seek for when we make the most beautiful of art, when we're making a sculpture of a bust, right, or a torso. You'll want to make sure that the waist and the hip relationship, if it's a woman, the hip should be 1.618 the length of the waist. And the bottom lip, right, in aesthetics, should be 1.618 the volume of the top lip. And a lot of people get this wrong, right? Some people will get dermal filler and they'll get too much of the top lip. And it makes them look imbalanced and they just don't understand. So you have to understand these aspects of principle, form, and proportion. And geometry teaches us that. Geometry is what God, and I believe God as a concept is the entire universe itself. There's nothing in the universe that's not God. That includes all of us. And we are all fractals, right, of this God consciousness that is constantly creating and recreating our universal and universal experience as we go through every single day. And being able to understand and recognize the majesty of the pattern of it all, the logos, is the most profound and beautiful thing, because then we are touching and experiencing the divine aspect of our world. And I fundamentally believe that there are two types of people in this world also, in the context that some people believe in miracles and others don't. The challenge with this is, and I perfectly respect all the people that don't believe in miracles, but if you don't, you'll never experience it. Even if you experience what others would refer to as a miracle, it goes back to the 30 eyewitnesses thing. Even if you experience it, you'll deny it away to the point where it never existed. You would never have gotten any benefit from it at all. And I've learned through life that there is a magic aspect to the world around us. And the answer to it is not an abracadabra. The answer to tapping into the magic aspect is changing your perception
So it's
and
a
opening yourself up to
frequency.
seeing it.
So you need to shift your frequency. Does it start with your mindset?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you think you can or you think you can't, you'll be right. That's a Henry Ford quote. If you think you can or you think you can't, you'll be right. And it reminds me of my favorite scene in Empire Strikes Back in the Star Wars series, right, where Luke Skywalker is on Tatooine, right, which is like this swamp planet. And he's trying to get his X-Wing fighter out of the swamp. It's stuck in the swamp. It's like submerged completely. And so Yoda says, come on, you can do this. And just the scene before that, you saw Luke Skywalker like levitating Yoda, levitating all these rocks, everything, because they were small. He thought that's easy, so he could do it. So he went over to try to get the X-Wing fighter out of the swamp, to lift it up. And so he does like Yoda tells him. He puts his arm out there and he goes, I'm going to pull it out of the swamp. And it starts to move. But it gets up a ways and then he gives up. Fear takes over and he doesn't get out of the swamp. So Yoda basically comes in and paraphrasing here is like, step aside. We do this, right? He goes like this, like, and then pulls this entire X-Wing fighter onto dry ground, like lifts it up. And Luke Skywalker runs over to him and he says, Master, I don't believe it. And Yoda looks at him in that penultimate moment, looks at me and says, and that is why you fail.
So it's not setting the goal, it's creating an affirmation.
It's creating a series of affirmations through gratitude and confidence that create manifestation. Manifestation to me is not drawing a picture of something and putting it on my refrigerator door, or taking a photograph of something that I want, a yacht or something like that. No. Manifestation to me is feeling as if you've already done it. And being in that moment and being entirely present in that moment and feeling the emotion as if it's already happened.
So is this what you think drives Elon Musk?
Yeah, I do. I think he's a master manifester. I think he knows exactly. Now, the crazy thing is he could probably even get, and he probably likely will, become even better and better at it. Because you also can manifest the notion of not having to work all the time to do it. The limitation sometimes we place on it is, okay, I've got to work nonstop. Right? I've got to put the toil and the sweat in. What I've now realized is that all the stuff that I thought, had this universal equation associated with it, those equations can now be challenged if I allow myself to feel the emotion associated with it.
What's the emotion you hate?
I don't hate any emotion now. I used to probably hate fear. I used to do things like, I remember I was in Shanghai. I brought my daughter when she turned 18. I took her to South Korea, because I lived in South Korea when I was 19 years old, and I wanted her to experience that. I took her to all my places that I kind of like lived in and visited. And then I took her to Tokyo as well. I lived there when I was in my 20s. And such an amazing, bustling city. I took her to the house I lived in Tokyo, in this expat village part of Tokyo. And then I took her to Shanghai and Beijing. And we're in the flea markets of Beijing and seeing all the crazy stuff they eat. Like kids in the US would be eating popsicles, and there they're eating like, stuff that look like scorpions. Right? It's like, it's very raw, right? The whole thing is like walking around, oh, let me just eat this giant bug on a stick. It's a very different experience. And I took her to Shanghai as well. And while I was there, I remember feeling a little bit guilty because I was at a point in time with one of my companies that had become a unicorn. And we were burning a lot of capital. And I started to feel guilty when I woke up one morning that like, oh, I should be at home working right now. I can't be on a 3-week long trip. The only one I've ever taken with my daughter like that. 18 years old, just me and her. And it was an amazing time, and I'm so grateful now that like we did that, because we still always talk about it. But I woke up one morning feeling anxiety because someone from the office had sent me a text saying, okay, we're getting low on cash again. You know, we've got to figure out a way to raise more capital. And it was always on my back. Even though I had 1,000 employees in the company, I was like, geez, you know, I always have to do this. And so I remember feeling this anxiety. And so I used to love to collect watches. I still do to a certain extent, but not as much as I used to. And so I woke up my daughter and I said, hey, sweetheart, today, do you mind if we go to this store? I want to go to the Bulgari store in the mall in Shanghai. And she said, sure, Dad. She said, what is it you want to get? I said, I'm going to buy a new watch. And she says, which one do you want to get? I said, oh, there's this Octa Reserve watch I want. It's got an octagonal shape. I've been wanting this watch. You know, I'm a collector, so I'll collect this. It's made by Gerald Genta, which is a very rare watch house in Geneva. And so I'd done all this research on it already because I already knew what my next present to myself would be. And it's an expensive watch. So I went to the shop and found the watch that I wanted. And it was even overpriced because it was more expensive than if I just bought it in the US. And I told my daughter that too. And she's like, well, why do you want to buy this then? I said, because today's the day. I'm going to buy this watch. And so I bought the watch. And the reason I bought the watch is because I was so worried that I wouldn't be able to raise the capital that I needed for my company 6 months from then because the cash was getting low. And so I put myself into a position like Cortez when he descended on Mexico. And he had 300 men with him and 6 ships. And the men got off the ships on the coast of Mexico, probably not far from Monterrey. They went to relieve themselves in the forest. They walked back out to the beach, and they see all their ships on fire.
There was no going back.
Burn the ships. So I was taking this philosophy, and I said to my daughter, I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to sustain, and so what I'm doing is I'm buying this watch as a gift to myself for congratulations for having already achieved it. Because I'm going to take the company public, or I'm going to do a Series A financing with a venture capital fund, and it's going to be at a high valuation, which is going to tee us up for a public offering. And I bought the watch. And every time I looked at the time, I remembered celebrating for the success I had already basically done in the future that I hadn't done yet.
So it triggered you.
Yes, I was collapsing a wave function of possibility into one outcome. Now, since then I've learned, I believe everything is predestined. And I didn't need to do all of that. But that was my path. I believed that I had to work really hard. I believed that I had to sweat. I had to sleep under desks. That I had to do all this stuff like Elon does. I believed all of that. Now I don't necessarily believe all of that.
Now, what do you say about the Earth? What do you think if the Earth had a voice, if it could speak? What would it say?
I think the Earth right now is in such a unique time of its evolution. You know, I believe that we live in a U-inverse where we think that we're seeing the stuff outside of us, but actually the stuff that we see outside of us, because it's tainted with our own perception biases, we can't separate those biases from our reality. We don't experience the world as it is, we experience it as we are. So therefore, when we see the world evolving around us, it's also representative in that same line of thought with an evolution going on within us, a change going on within us. I said earlier that when you asked me what emotion do I hate, I don't hate any emotion. I want to clarify that. I used to dislike discomfort. I used to dislike, and it caused me to be very conflict avoidant, because I could play the role of a diplomat. And that was a lot easier for me than to just give my bare truth and open my voice to what I was really thinking. So sometimes I would think something but say, oh, the world can't accept it the way I'm thinking it. I can't be totally transparent. You don't need to say everything you think, Robert. Right? So I learned that very early on. And I still don't believe I need to say everything I think, but being more intentional about a consistency between what I say and what I truly believe, I think is the most powerful and authentic aspect of knowing yourself that you can basically do and have. And so for me, I used to hate taking cold showers. Right? I hated cold showers. Like ice cold showers, like, this is terrible. It's very alarming, right, when it hits you in the morning like that. And then I switched to all cold showers. Why? The reason I did was because I wanted to lean into the discomfort. Not from a masochistic perspective, but I wanted to learn how to change my perception that cold water was cold and hot water was hot. So if you follow people like Wim Hof, who are able to do extreme things in extreme conditions, they will tell you it's all about their mental fortitude. I got myself to the point taking cold showers where I actually believed and imagined that the water was warm. This then extends to this whole stage in life. When I was younger, I would avoid emotions I didn't like. I'd avoid the conflict. I'd avoid the discomfort. And what I now learned is that every single emotion I didn't feel, it's like the ladder of life. You can skip rungs on the ladder of life, but eventually you have to go back and touch every rung you skipped. The same is true with every emotion you didn't feel, but needed to. So all those emotions that are like ice cold water that are discomforting to you are some of the most powerful aspects of finding and learning who you truly are and being comfortable with that. So it's not a masochistic practice. It's a self-realization and a self-acceptance practice. And it's one of the most powerful realizations I've come to. Now I allow myself to feel the emotion. I allow myself to feel that discomfort feeling of vulnerability. I allow myself to feel all those things that as a small child, my father said, son, don't cry. I'll give you something to cry about. Just like any father normally does with a son. But now I look at it and I realize that those emotions I didn't feel were stuck inside me somewhere, somehow, and they needed to come out still. Luckily they did, and they still are. But now, instead of like avoiding feelings, I allow myself to feel those feelings. And to be okay with the discomfort and realize that this too shall pass.
The way you just explained that, Robert, sounded easy. That you've come to terms with who you are. You know thyself. So to the audience, as we now do our send-off with Mr. Robert Grant, what are you learning today?
Every day is a path of some form of initiation. And someone asked me recently, does your philosophy change? Yeah, tons. The only thing I'm sure of now is the more I learn is the less I actually know. And the world around me is evolving, and it's a reflection of what's happening inside of me. So the things that I see and feel that I'm trying to press out of me show up in the world around me. So imagine, what if I told you that all those emotions that you didn't feel just get pressed into the world around you, and that's how your subconscious speaks to you. The zone of I know what I know versus I know what I don't know versus I don't know what I don't know. All three of those, conscious mind, subconscious mind, unconscious mind, when you can start to merge and have awareness of all three, that's truly knowing yourself. And that is another level of consciousness that is sometimes referred to by Carl Jung and others as superconsciousness. Being comfortable, realizing. Oftentimes people start to hate their narcissistic personalities, right? And I actually see narcissism as a doorway to spiritual awakening. Because at some point you have to look in the mirror and realize that what you thought was being reflected to everybody else is not what everyone else is seeing. They're seeing a more holistic view of you. because the eye can't see itself. The knife can't cut itself. Same concept. So I started to realize that if I could start to look at myself in that larger capacity, that larger sense, maybe I could really expand my relationships and go deeper with those relationships. That maybe the whole purpose of being here in this world is to learn how to feel all the emotions that we have and to learn empathy for everything and everyone. The most wise person, and you could say maybe this is an analog for what we think of as God. Maybe the one divides itself into the many simply for the joy of experiencing and observing itself through our unique eyes of perception. There'll never be another Dustin Plantholt. There never was a former Dustin Plantholt. There'll never be another Robert Grant. The one source creator decides to separate itself into many eyes of perception so that through our eyes it can experience it itself. And somehow, somewhere, all of the emotions that we feel associated with those experiences go to some field of information that makes the universal one more wise. Because it's collecting the infinite aspects and knowledge through all of our eyes of unique perception. So the people that experience a lot of self-loathing, and if even sometimes they'll go through a spiritual awakening, and they realize, they're like, I'm going to change my name. I'm not going to be Robert Grant anymore. You know, I want to dissolve my ego entirely. And through that dissolution of my ego, I'm going to change my name now. I'm going to be one divine, right? My name is going to be something light, and we've all probably seen people that have done this, right? And you're like, what the heck? But that's only one part of the process. The true awakening journey to understanding and knowing yourself is when you come full circle and realize that you are exactly who you've been looking for.
Thank you, Robert Grant, for sharing your story on For Your Voice.